I think the best way to approach assessment and defining what improv is to have a very clear set of goals in a rubric. So perhaps one element is you gave them these different building blocks, the different musical vocabulary. So student developing, proficient, or one, two, three, four, however you want to designate those categories. And then assess the effort and the ability to engage. I think that's easier to, okay, the student tried, the student excelled, the student met expectation. And then the issue is where you get into the creative part of improv. That's a little bit harder to quantify. I think it's better to talk about engagement rather than creativity, and then look objectively at the musical goals, whether they use the language that you wanted them to use in that specific moment. That helps kind of demystify this idea of improv. Improv is not a free-for-all. You know, you still have to operate within the limits of the musical idea that you wanted to come across.
I love the idea of a rubric because that gives a wonderful way to show progress, and then a student can learn their own progress as well. But how would you recommend, or what's been your experience in assessing the language, if you will? We talked about rhythm, but also in the context of telling the story.
This is where a student's own authenticity and own truth will ring true in their improv. Depending on the style that we're improving, there's norms and common practices. The way that a student will approach soloing over a blues or soloing over rhythm changes or a jazz standard is very different from the way that a student would improv over salsa or improv over R&B. Even in R&B, the norms of Motown are very different from the norms of disco, and very different from the norms of, you know, R&B after 2000. You give them the context, you give them the arena to operate in, and then have they picked up on the best practices that you tried to instill for that time period.
You introduced a number of different genres, style, culture. I would imagine that part of this is actually just assigning some listening.
Oh, definitely.
You know, for the teachers themselves, so that they're going to different resources and places, even just online. But then for the student to do a lot of listening and maybe even noodling around with transcription, if it's possible.
Yeah. A part of improv is studying the greats and studying the people who did it. Even if you can't write it, because to transcribe a Charlie Parker solo is definitely a task.
Yeah.
But if you can start just to pick out little nuggets,
Yeah.
you know, who is your favorite singer? So for example, if we're talking about Ariana Grande as opposed to Mariah Carey, who have some similarities, study who your favorite artist was listening to. And that's a great way for students to read up on the different people that they listen to. If they do their own research and figure out who their favorite artists were influenced by, then they have the opportunity to take ownership over who they enjoy and why, and have more depth.
Tell us then, in terms of kind of putting all these pieces together over maybe a sequence of a semester.
Tuning the ears is general music fundamentals. Then once we get to the cultural aspect, that's guiding what we're studying and why. And then after you have that, then I think that's when we start to look at assessment. Have you mastered the musical content? Is it true? Is it stylistically appropriate? And then that's when we get into assessment.
Wonderful. Well, it sounds like we have a pathway towards someone developing their own authentic creative voice.